If we take the rook here on c4, the Noctie will simply grab our rook here and forking the other rook, winning a whole rook. Hey guys, this is Andy from Noctie, and today we're gonna go through the weekly scenario for week 41 of 2025. This week's scenario is a rook and knight endgame where white holds an extra pawn. This scenario is a great way for practicing our endgame conversion skills. When we play games, whether it's online or over the board, it's quite often that we get in situations where we are one pawn up or perhaps sometimes even 2 pawns up. But still, converting those endgames require precise technique, and it's very easy that you let the advantage slip away if you're not careful. So in this case, our strategy, first of all, should be to, of course, exchange the pieces. And while doing that, we want to keep our pieces as active as possible. So notice here that if we remove all the pieces, meaning if we manage to trade off both the rooks and the pair of knights, then the ensuing pawn endgame will be a clear win. So a pawn endgame where one side holds an extra pawn is usually easily winning. But with more pieces on the board, the opponent has more opportunities to create counterplay and maybe trick us into a tricky situation. So the strategy here is, of course, that we should be open to trade the rooks and, if possible, even the knight. But let's start with just grabbing the open c-file by playing rook a to c1. And here, of course, black must challenge us on the c-file, otherwise it will allow us to infiltrate. So black plays rook f to c8, and here we, of course, can trade one pair of rooks, but doing so would give black the control over the c-file. So instead, we would like to maintain pressure and develop our pieces. And remember, in endgames like this, the king is an attacking piece. So here we can play king f3, bringing our king into the action, while we are also controlling the e4 and g4 squares for the black knight. Here, black can play knight d5, for example, activating the knight, and perhaps threatening to jump into b4 or c3 sometimes. But since those aren't any dangerous threats yet, we can simply continue developing our pieces, or rather say improve our pieces. Now we are centralizing the other rook, and we are potentially creating some tricky stuff against the black knight. Here, black can play knight to c3. They are jumping in, hitting our rook, and attacking our pawn. So here we simply play rook d2. That is also the only move, defending the pawn and getting our rook out of trouble. Now black can try to be active, push b5. So here the b5 pawn is of course protected by their knight, and their threat is to play b4 and then cementing the knight on c3. That will make our life very difficult. So of course we should try to stop that. We play a3. And now black can continue with that plan and play a5. And one pair of pawns come off the board. And from here, it is still unclear how black can create counterplay. So let's just stop for a minute and evaluate the position. So compared to the starting position, we see that white has still got the extra pawn. And furthermore, I think white has managed to make more progress. The knight is centered, the king is more active, as well as the rooks here are ready to double up on the c-file. It's still unclear how black can create counterplay, and on the next move, white is threatening to play rook d to c2, applying pressure down the c-file. And remember, the game plan here should still to be swapping off both rooks, and then having a knight endgame where a pawn up will be much more easier to convert. So yeah, now it's our turn to play against Noctie, and let's see if we can manage to win this. Alright, so here we are against Noctie, let's try our luck. And to begin, I'm just going to follow the game plan and play rook a to c1. We are activating our rook and grabbing the open file. And here, black wisely challenges us on the c-file. But now let's just bring in our king. We maintain pressure on the c-file while activating our king. Let's see what Noctie does, okay? So far Noctie follows our analysis, playing knight d5, potentially creating some threats on the b4 or c3 square. And here we can also follow the plan. We put the other rook in the center and targeting the black's knight. Noctie jumps in and we play rook d2. Remember to protect the a2 pawn. Let's see what Noctie comes up with. Alright, interesting. So now we are walking into our analysis. Let's see. Here we don't have much choice. I think b5 is still a very good try, because if white isn't careful here, Noctie will play b4, and I think that will make it quite difficult for us to convert this position. But here we can play a3, stopping b4. And nice, we got a purple move, so happy to see that Noctie likes our game plan. And here we play b4 ourselves. And that is important because we can't allow the b4 pawn push from black. Now we swap pawns, and here we are actually exactly at the position that we analyzed. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens here. Okay, Noctie plays rook c4, going for an active move. Let's see. So they are threatening our pawn. So upon closer inspection, we see that the b4 pawn is actually not under fire, because if black grabs it, then the c3 knight will be hanging. Okay, but how do we react against it? I'm looking for a tactical idea here. Can we just take the b5 pawn with the knight? The idea is that if black takes back with the knight, then of course we can take the rook. The rook should be hanging. And if black doesn't do anything, then we can just grab the knight here and c3. I think this should be working. Let's see. So Noctie is trying to complicate the position, but I think this will work out for us tactically. Here Noctie goes for a think. Okay. Wow, this is actually quite amazing, because if we take the rook here on c4, then Noctie will simply grab our rook here and forking the other rook, winning a whole rook. So that will be losing for us instead. And now if we, for example, play rook d to c2, Noctie can grab this pawn, and I think it's going to be difficult for us to convert this. Here I'm going to actually use a couple of takebacks, because I think, oh yeah, it was one takeback. So here I think actually the knight b5, that must be a mistake, because Noctie had this amazing idea of knight e4. Okay, so here we are again, and let's give this another try. And I think the approach here should be that we remember that the rook on c4 is not threatening the b4 pawn. So we don't need to react to that immediately. Instead, I think we can play rook d to c2. We are doubling up, threatening the knight here on c3. And I think that will make it difficult for black. Let's try it. Okay, Noctie doubles up and protects the knight. Okay, how about this idea? Again, let's analyze this one more time. So here, of course, the knight can't take, because then the rook will be falling on c4. And if we take on b5, I don't think Noctie has this idea once more, because then we can simply take the rook. If Noctie takes, we take back, and in the end Noctie can fork the rook and king, but then we would have traded the rooks instead of losing a whole rook, and then the knight endgame should be winning. So yeah, let's go with this. Let's see what Noctie does here. Noctie goes for a think. And I think here knight e4 should be the only try. Yes, Noctie found it. Nice. But yeah, the difference here, of course, is that when we take the rook, Noctie forks us. Oh yeah, and that makes sense. It's better for Noctie to fork us immediately because she does not want to trade both rooks. And here we can simply play king e2 and Noctie grabs back the rook, and now we'll still be 2 pawns up. Okay, and here I think we can play knight a3, exploiting the fact that the rook is pinned, so Noctie can't take. She'll have to move the knight to defend the rook, and then we'll swap off the remaining rooks. Let's do that. Nice, we got a blue move, so that is a great move. Exploiting the pin and the unprotected rook on c8. Noctie protects it, and now we simply trade the rooks. And now with the rooks gone, a knight endgame is quite similar to a pawn endgame, meaning that if you have a pawn up in these types of endgame, it's going to be quite easily winning. And now we have 2 pawns up, so yeah, this should be a comfortable win. But still, let's not be too comfortable. We still need to convert this and not make any blunder. Right, here I think I'm just gonna bring the king up as far as possible and support our b pawn. Okay, here I'm gonna play f3, stopping knight e4. Noctie attacks our pawn, but we can simply defend it. And soon our b pawn will be running. Okay, let's continue with our king. And now Noctie is threatening knight d5. So let's play e4, stopping that. Okay, and now let's push our pawn once. Noctie goes there, and let's see. Here we can play knight e5 check. I like this idea. King goes up, and now we can play... Let's just keep it simple and play f4. Protecting the knight, while also moving away our f-pawn from the black's knight. And here I want to play knight c6. Alright, let's just swap off the pawns. Okay, king goes there. And now I'm thinking of knight c6, disturbing the knight. But also I could probably just play king a6, and then the pawn is running. So I think Noctie would have to sacrifice the knight. And black's king here cannot penetrate our position. So yeah. Okay. Noctie goes for that, with the idea if we grab the pawn here, then of course our knight will be hanging. Okay. So here I'm just gonna retreat the knight. Noctie takes. And here, yeah, let's just take with a pawn. And the idea here is that if Noctie goes for a knight, the knight cannot be taken because our pawn will be just running down the board. Alright, and now we bring in our king to support the f-pawn in its march towards the queening square. Okay, bring the king further in, and soon we'll be able to use it to basically force away black's king. Alright, and now let's play king e4. So here, when we have a whole knight up, we don't need to worry about opposition or anything, because we could also use our knight to always disturb the black's king. Okay, and now king e6, and soon we'll be able to march down the pawn. And now we'll have checkmate on the next move. Alright, nice, we did it, although we needed to use a takeback, but still, it was good practice. So this week's scenario was a great exercise on endgame technique, and more specifically, how to convert a winning endgame when you are whole pawn up. And in this case, as we saw, I made a mistake and had to use a takeback to be able to win this. And that just shows how careful you must be in these types of positions, because the opponent will do everything in their power to try to confuse us and create as much counterplay as possible. And the pressure is on us to actually show that we can win this. And this exercise is great for cranking up Noctie's difficulty if you complete it at the regular level. So you could actually go all the way to Queen 4 if you want to challenge yourself and master the endgame technique. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and hope you have fun with this position. And as always, happy playing. Bye bye.